Thank you for inviting me to give a talk. I will be talking about a pilot of using Sample Manager for COVID-19 surveillance of serology for COVID-19 antibodies. Before I do that, a little background on LabKey at the university. Kind of a little bit different than the three previous talks. We've actually been using LabKey server since 2010. So we have 10 years of experience of using LabKey server and kind of grew into Sample Manager instead of coming to Sample Manager as an initial need. We use LabKey currently to perform data integration and data management and analytics for human research studies. So this is everything from clinical data, specimen inventory, and assay data. And we do this across, over these 10 years, a variety of studies and biorepositories, helping investigators in a bunch of research domains from environmental health, pediatrics, infectious diseases, set up and use LabKey as their data management system. So when we thought about why Sample Manager, I had to take a step back and look at the variety of types of sample management operations that are happening across the university. These are anything from strictly biobanking operations that may process and freeze samples and make them available to researchers at a cost or a fee. Central processing laboratories, maybe these are tied to clinical trials. They use different processes to track and process those samples. Divisional or departmental biorepositories, so maybe these are samples historically consented for future use, and they want to let them be available for future use. And the last one is the individual researcher labs. So there is a hierarchy of complexity and needs at the university for specimen management. Historically, the biospecimen inventory software used at the University of Rochester in different departments has mainly been client server based architectures with a kind of a desktop GUI client that gets installed. Why Sample Manager is we're really kind of going after these individual research labs. There's already solutions that are working for those more complex needs, but kind of this long tail of individual researchers labs, maybe they're still using Excel to manage their samples. And so the existing solutions have many issues. They're cumbersome to install the desktop clients, keep them updated and troubleshoot them. Some of them have steep learning curves to use the software. And then of course, our goal as data management is to integrate that information with other data. And so there's third-party database integration issues. So we've used LabKey, as I said, for over 10 years. As Sample Manager came out, I've been keeping my eye on it to say, if this would be a good fit. And so we kind of actually identified a project and have two driving questions for why we tried or pilot Sample Manager. Could it meet the specimen management needs for individual research labs? Again, we have other solutions already in use that may be too complex for them. So is this meeting them where they are? And going back to, I think, the first day of the conference, is this going to trigger their thrive or survive? And I believe a lot in listening to the end users and really hearing their feedback. A lot of them, the existing biorepository software available at the university would trigger their survive instincts. And secondly, what is the efficiencies of using a tool that's already built on LabKey server for our existing data flows? So our pilot project that we decided to give Sample Manager a go, brand new lab that wanted to track samples and conduct assays. This is a single laboratory, and there was a single sample type that they were interested in. These are capillary blood draws using microsampling fingerstick kits. A little bit of complexity in this was that there's actually two study populations that they're collecting these fingersticks on currently. COVID-19 family immunity surveillance study. This is a single time point with up to 1,000 families across the Rochester area. Typical family has 2 to 3 or 4 family members. So we're talking about 3,000 finger sticks. They also are participating in a COVID-19 RADx underserved population study. This is testing school populations that serve students with complex disabilities. And these people are monthly longitudinal sampling on over 250 participants for up to 6 months. So this is, 1,500 samples. So within the next year, there'll be about 4,000 to 5,000 samples that need to come into the lab and be tracked and run on an assay. And that assay will be a quantitative multiplex Luminex-based antibody test for multiple coronavirus antigens. So what was the goals with the project? Meeting with the lab and listening to their needs, and knowing that this is being used in the context of other data being collected clinically. The lab needed something that they could easily accession samples, derive and track lineages, aliquot level volume, and of course, freezer management. The second was management of those assay results that are going to come from those biospecimens. And then from the data management perspective, it needed to be integrated with other study data within the larger informatics context, in this case, the LabKey study module. So I wanted to take a second and have a kind of a logical diagram of what the informatics infrastructure kind of looks like. So both of these studies collect their clinical data in REDCap. That data is moved into LabKey server, and then the samples will be received by the lab in Sample Manager, accession, tracked, and then assay data will be generated. From both REDCap and Sample Manager, that data goes back into LabKey study to be integrated for analysis. So I kind of have a few slides to document the workflows, and some of this is pre-Sample Manager, but some of it is within Sample Manager, and kind of give you an overview of how all the data moves through these systems. The sample collection workflow. So all finger sticks are already assigned a barcode from the manufacturer. And so at the time of sample collection, kits are actually scanned into REDCap by the clinical coordinators to associate that kit with the subject and the visit. Kits are then dropped off at a cold room, or if the visit was done over a telemedicine visit, as with the family surveillance study, those kits can be mailed back to the lab. Each night, the REDCap data is imported from the LabKey server, and using the ETL module, new collected finger stick samples are created in Sample Manager automatically. This reduces the amount of data entry and initial accessioning of the finger stick for who it belongs to, what the barcode ID is, and what time point it belongs with. This actually makes it very easy for the sample receiving workflow. Since the kit already exists in Sample Manager, the lab just needs to scan the vial into the search box in Sample Manager, and it should find the sample kit row. They can go in and verify both the participant information, the visit designation, as well as the draw date. And the lab only needs to enter in the date that the finger stick was actually received. Everything else is already generated for them. From the same detail screen, they can then quickly derive 2 finger stick swabs. So each kit contains 2 swabs. So they can easily, without leaving that screen, generate 2 derived swabs, enter in any additional information, and of course, track the lineage of what's been derived from each kit. The next step is for them to then place these in 96 well plates in their freezer locations, and that is the end of the sample receiving workflow. The assay workflow, this is kind of still a work in progress and being developed. They're still in a sample collection phase of the projects. But the idea here is that the serum would be separated from the blood swabs, and those derived serums would be entered into Sample Manager. Any remaining serum volumes would be updated in Sample Manager if there's any leftover materials, and the vials for those serums would then be placed in their box locations in freezer management. When they're ready to actually run a plate on the Luminex-based assay, they actually can either use the workflow to create a pick list, or go into a plate-by-plate layout and export the sample list in the way that could be directly imported into their assay instrument software. This reduces the amount of data entry of the generated assay data that gets exported from the machine and imported into LabKey. The data then gets assay quality controlled and, of course, linked back to the study in LabKey. So back to our logical context here, both the sample aliquots and availability information, as well as any assay data that gets generated, also gets linked back to the study to be combined with the REDCap data for analysis. So the results, these are the two sample types that we have currently in this pilot project. The kits, again, are automatically created, and the swabs are then derived as part of the sample receiving process. So we have about a third or a fourth of what we expect, and we started collection in June for both of these studies. Actually, I looked at these numbers here for fingerstick kits. Within the last 3 days, the numbers have actually changed by 50. So that's kind of the speed at which they're able to accession and track these samples. Freezer management. So they've got their freezers set up, their shelves and the racks. We've got about 32 current plates. I think the idea is to eventually have 50 or more plates when all said is done. And it's like the talks before us, one of the issues with some of these smaller research labs is that they do have a lot of students coming in or technicians coming, going on different projects. So having a central place to track freezer location that's not in an Excel file that no one remembers where it was when the person left is very advantageous for this lab. So what were the benefits and feedbacks from this pilot project? The lab really felt that the UI was very easy to use, and to write an SOP was very easy. And it was easy to derive samples upon receiving a kit. They liked the naming patterns. So this is how sample identifiers get generated in the system, because they can make sure they are unique and uniform across all lab members, which sometimes can be an issue in Excel files if someone doesn't follow the conventions. The lab absolutely loves the plate and box maps and freezer layout and freezer management features, which they didn't have in their Excel files before. And then they also love the convenience of using the lineage to navigate around, as well as kind of using it as a visual audit log of kind of what happened to a sample. From a data management perspective, we were able to leverage our existing investment and knowledge in LabKey to customize the data flows, the processes, and data quality checks to make sure that samples that were collected in REDCap actually were documented as received. If not, we were able to create reports so that someone could follow up on those kits. Integrate LabKey Sample Manager gives us the potential to save time and money, replacing the need for intense data integrations with third-party inventory systems. So we were able to get the integration between Sample Manager and study going in a matter of days. One of our next steps is to investigate bulk operations. As I said, we're in a sample collection phase with this lab and this project. Eventually, they're going to want to identify samples that they want to run in a batch. And so we need to be able to learn how to do bulk operations. Investigate workflows to help with those assay planning and organization. Investigate bartender integration for label printing. So we have bartender, we've been using it with our other biospecimen inventory software. And so now we're trying to investigate how we can continue to use that solution with Sample Manager. Incrementally expanding the number of sample types tracked by this lab. It was within a few days or weeks that the main lab person was like, well, can we start putting other things in here? And I had to kind of put the reins on this because they saw the potential But as we were just using this as a pilot, but the goal here is to do that for them, to actually make this a complete lab tracking system for them. And the last thing is to expand, of course, to other laboratories that we provide data management and analytical services to. And so there's a lot of other labs that could use a simpler solution that's still very powerful. Wants and needs, I think, Hannah, I'm excited to see the roadmap. I think a lot of what's on there is some, things that we've been looking forward to. So vial or sample statuses, being able to track what's emptied, what's been shipped, put things on hold, and things like that. Reporting, for us, being able to take a whole sample manager and quickly filter down to just the study or project to see just everything in that across all the navigational pages, as well as participant, sample, and visit vial counts and total volumes. So being able to quickly go into a study and say, okay, for how many time points do we have 2 vials that have at least 10 mils left to do assay planning? So kind of crass-tabular counts. And then the last thing, thinking about how to expand this to multiple laboratories, one could easily envision different labs defining their sample types very differently. And so having a way to semantically or govern in what fields are available on certain sample types, so that we have a shared definition across the university of what a sample type means. So I want to give a special thanks out to our group, the Research Data Integration and Analytics team in the Clinical and Translational Science Institute's Informatics Core. We've been a growing group that, again, have been using LabKey for over 10 years. Our Center for Integrated Research Computing, who really supports our compute and storage infrastructure, as well as our LabKey partners. Over the years, there's probably too many to name. Hannah, not only as the sample manager, product owner, but as our account manager, Josh Eccles, to name a few. But I know it's too many to actually list on this slide. Everybody who's over the years that has helped us implement LabKey.
Thank you so much, Anthony. I gotta say, like from working with you guys for so long, it was so exciting to hear when you guys were interested in piloting Sample Manager, and we definitely appreciate all of your feedback and sort of support with that. It's super fun. So of course I have a question, no surprise to anybody, but you mentioned sort of the survive or thrive response, and that some people might be sort of surviving on the current systems. I'm interested to hear, it sounds like there's been good feedback on Sample Manager so far. Do you think that we're closer to hitting that thrive response for change?
Yeah, I think the initial response from this lab was the thrive kind of channel, right? They immediately said to what else they could envision, what else they could put in here and use the system for. So I think it's definitely encouraging that was the response from this pilot project.
Yeah, and just sort of as a comment on that, I think what we'll have to be very mindful of in the future is that, as Sample Manager continues to grow in functionality and usage, continuing to elicit that thrive response instead of, going into the slog of data management every day. So a few other questions here. As a group that has already been using LabKey Server extensively, how did you fit your Sample Manager application into your existing install, or was it a separate install or different project?
Yep. So we actually run multiple production LabKey servers. In this case, we actually started a brand new, and this may be getting a little technical, high-level LabKey project to house these sample managers, and the idea that new labs that get onboarded would also go as a subfolder under this sample manager project.
Awesome. Yeah, and imagine that kind of makes for easy navigation and easy maintenance for you guys on the administrative side too.
Yes. Yes, having it under a single project allows us to use project level roles and group definitions that are scoped just to that LabKey project.
Cool. One last question here. Are you able to integrate this with your other biological specimen inventory systems?
I think I would ask, what do they mean by integrate? LabKey has an extensive, and we've used the extensive set of APIs. That I don't envision any technical issues in integrating any two or migrating any data. It's just a matter of implementation and time.
Awesome.